Salvation is strong and eternal. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, I'm going to turn this light off so you can see a little clearer here. And I realized all the handouts were gone last week, so I was like, oh, where'd they go? So if you need an extra handout or you forgot yours at home, if you want to journal along with us, there's a couple there on the table where Deb's at. But we are going to come over here to chapter 2, verse 6, and we're going to look at the Lord's second part, which you could say, of his second answer to Habakkuk. Remember Habakkuk, he was giving these complaints to the Lord. He was struggling with how the Lord was making it very clear that God was going to send the Babylonians, known as the Chaldeans at this time in this book, that they were the same people. He was going to use them for his glory. And he was specifically, with many nations, but specifically with God's people, Israel, the southern tribes, and the northern tribes. They were going to take over the Assyrians. This was still years in the future a little bit, but God was revealing to Habakkuk. As Habakkuk called out to God, God, our country, the surrounding area, it's so terrible. Why are you letting evil continue? And God's response was, I have a plan. And we're going to see more of his response here. But it was not the answer that Habakkuk was looking for. We've been there, where we call out to the Lord with an appeal, a concern, and his response is not what we were expecting. We know he's good, and this is a prophet. Habakkuk's a prophet, but he is struggling with the way God's plan is unfolding for his own life and for his people, Israel. And so God has responded once, and Habakkuk went back to him with another response. The first part of the response was Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2 of the second answer. And let me just read that, get the context before we jump in. The Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. Want it very clear. If there was someone, a courier running, make this so clear. The Babylonians are going to take over Israel. We'll have it work out. But actually, I think, as we read on, the tablet would probably say the righteous should live by faith. Just live by faith. The righteous must live by faith. But write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. For still, the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. Can you see this okay? If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. And I'm going to open this up here so I can get my we can write on here. There we go. It will not delay. Behold, his soul. Now these his here, as we've been underlining, as these I've been underlining in blue here, this refers to the Chaldeans. Okay? His soul, the soul of the Chaldeans, personifying the nation of Babylon as a person. His soul is puffed up. You ever met anyone whose soul is puffed up? Not nice to be around. It's kind of like, ugh. They're always arrogant, always whatever. Well, the Babylonians were very arrogant. The Chaldeans were starting to be very puffed up. And by the time they take over Israel, no one was stopping them. And they weren't giving God the glory. They were saying, our God is a Marduk, or whatever their gods' names were, Babylon. They're doing all this for us, and prove me wrong, kind of thing. His soul is puffed up, and it's not upright with him. But the righteous shall live by his faith. This first part of this answer, God basically says to Habakkuk, I know you're concerned. Live by faith. Live by faith. And here's what you need to believe. But before he jumps into how God's going to work and use the Chaldeans, verse 5, moreover, wine is a traitor. The Babylonians were known for their drunkenness. They were known, in fact, in their weird religion, both the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, all of them many times would get very drunk when they needed to make an important decision. Does that sound like it makes sense? Not at all, but their warped thinking was, we're going to get so pickled, so drunk, that when we make this decision, it'll be clear that the gods are helping us make this. And so we'll know it's the right decision. It's totally wrong thinking. And remember when Belteshazzar is having his drunken party, okay, and they're drinking out of the goblets and the utensils of the temple, and they're having this part, they are drunk, and he is drunk totally. But remember the hand comes out and writes on the wall, and God's presence is seen, and he's scared to death. They were very much drinking. So wine is a traitor. They love wine. They even use wine in their religious and their decision-making things. An arrogant man who is never at rest. His greed is as wide as Sheol. And here, it's actually probably personifying the Babylonians as wine. Just as before, they were like fishermen in a net. Now, wine is a traitor. Wine will trade. If you give in to wine, it will hurt you. And that's what the Babylonians are. They are drunk, but they're almost like wine. They're arrogant men who are never at rest. Their greed is as wide as Sheol. Like death, the Babylonians never have enough. He gathers for himself all nations and collects as his own all peoples. Habakkuk's probably listening to this and is like, yes, so why, God, are you letting this happen? Why are you letting these people take over or be part of your plan to take Israel in captivity? But God doesn't stop there. Now God is going to put at rest some of Habakkuk's concerns. And that's what we're going to look at the second answer. There's going to be 5 woes that God's going to give here against Babylon. Whenever we hear woe, it's not a good thing. Okay? We've been going through Revelation with the men, and you see woe, woe, woe. It's a very sober, powerful warning. I don't watch the clock here because make sure. Okay, we're good. All right. This is the Lord's second answer, part 2. Shall not these, and who are these? That's what we want to look at. When I was doing this, who are these? We need to look, who are these? We want to figure that out. Shall not all these take up their taunt against him with scoffing and riddles for him and say, well, who would they were just talking about? Let's look back at verse 5. He gathers for himself all nations and collects his own all peoples. These are probably the these. Down the road, one day, it was inconceivable this would happen, but Babylon would fall. And it would fall instantly in a night. Remember after Belteshazzar's prophecy? No one saw it coming. Well, I shouldn't say no one saw it coming, but at this moment, no one saw it coming. But these nations and peoples that they had taken over, they are going to rise up one day and taunt against him, against Babylon, with scoffing and riddles for him, and say, so this is kind of unique. The peoples are going to rise up and laugh one day at Babylon, God's saying. They're going to taunt them. Now, they're not doing it now, but God wants to reassure, I am righteous. You know I'm righteous, and I have not altered any of my righteousness or my sovereignty. I have a plan for allowing Babylon to be in power at this time. But their time will not continue, because God will never bless unrighteousness. He, in his sovereignty, in his providence, can use sinful people for his purposes. Thank God he used us. But they will not last. And this is very similar to all kinds of oracles against Babylon that you see in Jeremiah, Isaiah, even in Revelation. Okay? But let's look at these woes. Any questions before we continue? Okay. I think we'll try to go through this, and we'll read each woe at a time. So the first one starts at the end of verse 6, and it goes to verse 8. Woe to him. So I'm going to put our woe here. Well, I already highlighted it, but I like colors. Woe to him who heaps up what is not his own. So here we have, he's going to the Babylonians. Woe to him who heaps up what is not his own. For how long? And loads himself with pledges. Now here, what is a pledge? Kind of like an IOU. They were no, I don't know if you saw, I think it was on Fox News, I saw there's an article that they just found an amazing discovery, which again, for those who like archaeology, it's amazing. For those who like the gift shop at the museum, it's not interesting at all. But they were going through some of the tunnels, and in I forget what part of Jerusalem it was, but you remember where Hezekiah built up the tunnels and the water shafts and all this kind of stuff. And they were excavating in there, and they found a shard of pottery that was not written in Hebrew, and it wasn't written in Aramaic. It was written in old Akkadian or cuneiform. Remember cuneiform? You heard about that? And like little wedges and stuff. They brush up and they're like, oh! And they said the person who found it just like screamed, ah! Okay, you're like, what's wrong with this person? They were able to translate it basically as part of basically a bill from Assyria to one of the kings of Judah. Now they can't tell which king, but as they're looking at it, they know it's written in a format, and it's basically, you owe us money. And if you remember when Assyria finally had enough and took them out, they were not paying their tribute. One of the kings said, I don't want to pay tribute anymore, we're going to do our own thing. And God said, just surrender to Assyria, because that's the plan. Well, they found some of this, and they're like, oh, and we know historically it's happened, and these people who found it they're not even biblical. They don't care about the Bible, but they're excited because, oh, look, we have a link. The first time we've seen any Assyrian writing at this age, like 2,700 years ago, in this spot of Jerusalem. So they're really excited. But basically, it was saying, you owe us money. You made a pledge to us. and you're not paying it. You need to pay some aspect of that. So this is what Babylon would do. Hey, well, we won't kill you all. That's fine. Yeah, we won't kill you all, but you owe us a lot of money. We want lots of talents of gold, lots of talents of silver, lots of food, lots of this. This is what Babylon, and woe, God says, to him who heaps up what's not his own. It's not yours. Those are other things that belong to people. You're stealing them from people. This first woe is going to bring a curse, or a judgment is going to come one day in Babylon because of their wickedness, specifically in taking what belongs to others. Loading himself with pledges. Will not your debtors suddenly arise, and those awake who will make you tremble? Then you will be spoiled for them, going back to the nations, because you have plundered many nations. All the remnant of the people shall plunder you. Because you plundered many nations, all the remnants of the people shall plunder you. 4. And there we have a unique thing. What's the woe? Here's a woe. 4. Here's the ultimate reason why. The blood of man and violence to the earth and cities to all who dwell in them. Woe to you, Babylon, because you have spilled men's blood. You've been violent throughout the known earth. You've been violent and bloody to cities and all who dwell in them. Woe to you, Babylon. Now Habakkuk's thinking, there could be two sides of the coin here. I'm very thankful that God is going to judge them one day, but I just wish it would happen before it hit us. Because they will do this to Israel. So Habakkuk, as we'll see later, he's still struggling, but later on next week, Lord willing, we'll look at his prayer, which is beautiful. And he takes all this truth in, and he worships God. He lets worship drown out fear. Or not drown it out, but overwhelm his fears. But anyway, here's the first woe. Does this one make sense as we go through? It's almost picturesque. This is where a lot of this is prophecy. And so sometimes you'll have even a poetic look to it. But woe to Babylon. Ultimately, we'll look at the 4 here. This kind of encapsulates all what we said. All they're stealing people's money and making them pay them tribute and all that. Okay? All right, let's go to the next second woe. So this is the first woe. Here's the second woe. Woe to him, okay, so here we go back to Babylon, to him who gets evil gain for his house. So it sounds very similar. To set his nest on high, to be safe from the reach of harm. You have devised shame for your house by cutting off many peoples. You have forfeited your life. Here we go. 4, here's the reason for this woe. 4, the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the woodwork respond. Many times they came in and just totally annihilated, burnt down to a crisp towns. And here they're woe because you have destroyed things that you had no reason destroying. You came in and you took other people's houses for your own. You destroyed their walls. You destroyed their craft work. You didn't need to do this, but you went above and beyond to show how powerful, and you tried to strike fear, which they did, into many people. You want to look like that town where we killed everybody and skinned them alive and did horrible things we want to talk about? Then surrender and just pay us tribute for life. Or you can be like that. Violent, evil. Very similar to the Assyrians, but Babylon would even go a step further. So woe to him who gets evil gain for his house. You gained it by evil. Very similar to here, but a little more nuance. And notice you forfeited your life by what you have done. One day Babylon will die, God says, but not yet. And they're still not even to doing this yet, but it's going to happen. And again, Habakkuk could be thinking, praise the Lord that this is going to happen, God's righteous judgment, but we're going to be part of the ones that this is going to happen to. So again, keep that in mind. One of the third woe? Okay, all right. Third woe, starting in verse 12 here. Woe to him, so we're back to the Babylonians again, who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. Now, sometimes they would go into towns and they build up fortresses. Ever played the game Risk? Okay? As you go along, you can take stuff over, but if you leave like one little piece in each country, you can do that at some point, but when you have the borders, you got to stack them up. Remember? That was a family love challenging game. Remember how Monopoly sometimes you see a picture on the table and it's flipped? You know, like, yeah, we had a great family time. Well, Risk, half of my family didn't want to play. They didn't understand. My dad and I would play. He would always beat me. And I think, remember one day, I don't know if you let me, I don't want to believe you let me, but I got him. And I was like, I've conquered, I quit, I've arrived. But you would you would sometimes mass a lot. Well, the Babylonians, they were a very smart, earthly speaking, people for quite a while when they took over territory. Some they would just annihilate, others they would take what they had and they would build it up even more. Put fortresses, put lots of soldiers there. So no one, if they weren't paying their bills, we're right down the road. We'll come skin a couple of you, kill you. They did this, but they did it through blood. They built a town with blood, found a city on iniquity. Behold, is it not from the Lord of hosts that people labor merely for fire and nations weary themselves for nothing? Now, this was a little confusing for me, but what he's saying here, I believe, is, listen, is it not from the Lord of hosts? That's the big part of this we want to see. Well, what's not from the Lord of hosts? Basically saying, those who labor, sometimes it just ends up burning up. And those who weary themselves, like Babylon would eventually weary themselves, they'd be so spread thin, you're going to weary yourself for nothing. And why is that going to happen to you, Babylon? Why, Babylon, are you going to do all this, and at the end of the day, I mean, we know in the history of things not for nothing. For Babylon, they're going to fizzle out. They'll be done. It was all for naught. Or why do certain peoples, God's even making a moment for a world, why do some people seem to do everything and then at the end of the day it just gets burned out? Almost like an Ecclesiastes type view here. Why? Because it's from the Lord of hosts. Is it not? So this is a question. It is. Rhetorically, yes, it is from the Lord of hosts. It is from the Lord of hosts. So the only fact that Babylon, you're getting all this is because God's allowed it. And it's going to happen to you too. You're going to be taken over one day. And here it is. Here's the big. Maybe you've heard this before in messages. This is one of those. Why? And here again, why is this woe here? This is a big one. Why will Babylon fall? Why a woe upon them? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of what? The knowledge of the Lord? What specifically of the knowledge of the Lord? The glory. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. When Babylon falls one day, and it will, no one's going to be able to attribute it to anyone but the glory of God. In fact, when you remember Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar eventually gets to the point where he honors and gives glory to the God of heaven. Remember when Belteshazzar and the kingdom's removed from him that night and Darius the Mede takes over? Remember what Daniel said to him? Because you have refused to honor the God of heaven, your kingdom will end tonight. No one, and even Darius himself, as Daniel would interact with him, he would see the glory of God in the lion's den, the glory of God. And so many times prophets of the Old Testament, where you would even hear many of the Jewish people come back, one day the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Now, I would suggest to you that this is probably a near and far fulfillment. You're going to see it right there with Babylon, but also you're going to see this in the millennial kingdom. When all, like Psalm 2 says, why do the nations rage? And even Babylon's going to come up in Revelation 2. This is probably speaking more to the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. We'll see that the clearest in the millennial kingdom. So there's probably focuses here that are speaking to future realities, but also an immediate one would be when Babylon falls. So when you say earth, that can be challenging. Is this the known earth at that time? It's probably not people in North America hearing about this, because remember, there's not a lot of communication with North America this time. We didn't call it North America, okay? But it will be in the millennial kingdom. But many times, sometimes when it says the earth, it means the known world at that time. So all those who know Babylon, they'll see the glory of God. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay, I wouldn't be too dogmatic on that, but more than likely this has millennial kingdom overtones as well. So eschatological truths here, because God's in control of all things. Okay, let's go on to, was that the third woe? There's two more. Let's go to the fourth woe. Remember we talked about alcohol before and how that was a big part, wine and drunkenness, that was a big part of the Babylonian culture. Well, they would do that many times to get their foes drunk, or make deals with people instead of wiping them out when they really didn't want to kill everybody. They would get people drunk and take advantage of them. Woe to him who makes his neighbors drink. You pour out your wrath and make them drunk, in order to gaze at their nakedness. Oh. So now we have a debauchery reality, a woe, and Babylon was filled with horrible, vile stuff. Now, one could say, well, the nakedness is to see. Remember when Joseph is in Egypt, and his brothers come down, they need food, they don't know it's him, and he says, you're spies, you've come to see the nakedness of the land. Okay? That could be, some say, well, no, this is talking about the nakedness of the land. You know, they want to get the leaders drunk so they can find out, no, what's your economy like? Whatever. But you know what? That doesn't really fit with Babylon, because Babylon knows. They're like this impenetrable force coming. They don't care about your economy. They like sexual immorality. It was a huge part of their pagan practice. When they would take captives, sometimes they would do horrible, and I don't want to get into sexual, terrible things to them before they killed them in front of all. And perhaps this is what it's referring to, getting them drunk, doing terrible things to these people, laughing at them, and then executing them. Notice, you do this in order to gain totally debauchery. You will have your fill. Your fill of shame instead of glory. Interesting here. What do we just see? The whole earth see the glory of God? Well, Babylon wants their own glory. Well, you will have your fill of shame. You're going to have shame, but it's going to be your own shame. Drink yourself. Show your uncircumcision. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. So we see this glory. God's glory, remember? The whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Babylon thinks they're glorious. Well, your glory will be thrown into the dirt. It'll be shamed. It'll be like someone who's naked and is totally ashamed, and all the nations will see. When it says the cup in the Lord's right hand, that's significant. The cup of the Lord's, what do we have in here? The cup of the Lord's wrath. God will have a cup of wrath for Babylon. And utter shame will come upon your glory. And then he calls out for a specific region that they had done terrible things to. The violence done in Lebanon will overwhelm you. Just like you were horrible to Lebanon, neighbor of Israel, you also, the violence will overwhelm you, as will the destruction of the beasts that terrified them. Remember the lion's den? Beasts? Well, that wasn't unique just to Darius or Darius. The Babylonians did that too. The Romans like to do that. They love to see people get torn apart by wild beasts and lions and dogs. You did that to Lebanon. You allowed those things there. It's going to happen to you. As will the destruction of the beasts terrify them. Here we have 4. Okay, so now we see this link here, encapsulating it all. Woe to you, why? For the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. But in this one, then we've kind of seen this. They're all like this. They're all woe for what we did, but specifically, we could say debauchery. To gaze at their nakedness, shame. Okay, you are a debauched nation. That gives us, we have to be careful in our own country, man. We got a lot of immorality in our own country. God sees that as well. We need to pray that we as Christians will stand firm, stand strong, and be faithful to what God has called us in a culture that is very wicked. So that is kind of the last phrase. Now this next woe. Any questions before we go on? This isn't a fun one to dwell on, but this can encourage Habakkuk, because you know what? Habakkuk can't see every evil, nasty little feast and debauchery thing that the Babylonians are doing, but God does. God sees, just as he'll see Belshazzar's in every one. And remember what Habakkuk said earlier in his first complaint, Lord, you're a purer eyes than to behold evil. How can you look at this and not judge? And God said, oh, I'm going to judge Habakkuk, but in my time, in my way. And actually, Israel's doing the same thing. We doesn't say that here, but this is what's going on. This is what is complaining about. There's justice is paralyzed, Habakkuk would say. But God is again reminding, I am righteous and I see all. Let's look at this 5th woe. And this woe starts a little different. It starts down here. Here's the 5th woe, but it actually starts up here. And it kind of introduces this woe a little differently. What profit is an idol? Let's see if I can do a different color here. Idol. We're going to see idolatry through here. What profit is an idol when its maker has shaped it? A metal image, a teacher of lies. Satan is behind every idol worship. And he loves to teach falsehood through the medium of idolatry. Isn't this is really the core of why Israel was being taken into captivity? Because they did not worship the true God. They worshiped idols and they turned from him. Well, the Babylonians are no different. But he starts out, what prophet is an idol? Is there any prophet to an idol? No. Not eternally, and not spiritually, and not with God. That's a teacher of lies. 4, now here, this 4 is actually going to come before the woe is pronounced. But this is ultimately another reason why God is going to destroy Babylon. 4, its maker, and we're going to make this one I'm going to underline it because it's going to relate to Babylon. Its maker trusts in his own creation when he makes speechless idols. Remember how many times God would refer to idols in the Psalms, and they have hands but they feel not, they have ears but they hear not. Why? Because God didn't create them. And they don't honor God. Man made it. And man is worshiping ultimately himself when it comes to idolatry. What I did, what I made, my dreams, my ambitions, whatever it might be. And here's a rhetorical question. Can this teach? Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped over a little. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead. Okay, but no, a teacher of lies. Okay, that's idol. I'm sorry, let's look at the woe here. Sorry. Woe to him. Okay, here's Babylon. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, and notice it says. You're talking to something that doesn't even talk. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, awake, time to wake up. To a silent stone, arise. But what would Babylon do before they went into battle many times? Arise, they would pray to their gods. Arise for us and fight for us. What was Israel doing? They were having this synergistic, trying to have feet in both camps. Oh, follow God. Let's be like the nations too. Let's have these idols. It doesn't work. But the Babylonians, they weren't even trying to. They had their gods. And they would say, awake, O God, and arise for us. And God says, can this idol teach you anything? It can't even wake up. It's not alive. But there is a demonic reality behind it. Behold, this idol, is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in it. We know that. So they can't breathe. They're covered with gold and silver. They can't teach. Notice it says they're speechless. They can't awake. They can't arise. And it's been made by a Babylonian person. But, big but here, but the Lord is in his holy temple. And here we go. Habakkuk. This is going to be God's final word to Habakkuk in here. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Now, did we just hear about silence in these idols? They can't talk, they can't talk, they can't talk. Why? Because they're not alive. But here we see this phrase of all the earth. Let all the earth, and this would include Israel as well, this would include Habakkuk, keep silence before him. Now, is God saying, don't ever pray to me? Don't ever come to me with your troubles. Don't whatever. No, but there comes a point. Remember when Job is answered by God out of the whirlwind, and Job is struggling, and we would be struggling. He lost his children. He lost all his wealth and stuff, but he also was losing his health. But more than that, he was starting to struggle with his view of God. And then God comes out of the whirlwind and says, hey, Job, gird up your loins, tighten your belt. I know you're having a hard time, but you've been raising some objections against me. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and you try to answer them. And none of them Job can answer other than, you are God, and I am not. And remember at the very end, Job says, I'm going to cover my mouth. But he says, I'm going to trust you, you're good. It's very similar here. Let all the earth keep silence before him, but it's more of a silent worship. Because all the earth is going to be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Let the earth keep silence versus complaining, versus saying, God, you're not good, versus saying, God, I don't like this. Keep silence. Trust and obey, and like he said before, live by faith. The righteous live by faith. And sometimes for us, living by faith means silently trusting God, plodding forward. Doesn't mean don't pray to me. You have to be careful of that. But there's a picture. Does this make sense? It's not shut up, don't talk to me, but it's worship me. And at times you just want to worship in silence. Almost a silent awe as well. Let the earth keep silent, a silent awe before God. Why? Because the Lord is in, where's the Lord? In his holy temple. And where is this holy temple? Well, God had already told them, I'm not with you guys in Judah. You're doing all your foolish stuff. My presence isn't with you there. It's not the earthly temple. This is in heaven. And as we've been going through Revelation, if you get to Revelation 4, 5, 6, and even beyond that, you see that there's a temple where God's glory is in heaven. God is in his holy temple. He's in control. He's in heaven. He is in sovereign, good, righteous control. Let all the earth keep silence before him. There are some thoughts that this might be also looking forward to millennial, but I feel that that's not the best thing to run into right now. I'm not saying it's not. Here he's talking about he's right now in his holy temple, and you always see God's holy temple referred to as the one in heaven. Now, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. I looked and I saw the Lord, and he was sitting on his throne in his temple. Okay, so what a good perspective when we're going through difficult times. I don't understand what's going on, and I know what I do. God's told me that he's going to do a work. I'm going to come back here real quick. Remember where God said we said we're going to look back at it. In chapter 1, verse 5, I am doing a work in your days. That's going to come up next week. I'm going to do a work in your days that you would not believe, and told Habakkuk. And Habakkuk is shocked. And he also complains again. But at the end here, it's even when God's plan is shocking to you, just remember that God's in his holy temple. And keep silence before him. Silent awe. Worship, trust, wait on the Lord. Ben, you had a question or comment?
I was just thinking how this mirrors Romans 1 from even, as you referenced a couple weeks ago, Romans 1 about the righteous shall live by faith, but then you read the next section of God's righteous judgment and wrath, and it mirrors these woes quite a bit, even to the point of exchanging the glory of God for that of creatures.
Yep.
The idolatry aspect, and then being given to all kinds of dishonorable passions. It's just interesting how it mirrors so closely. Paul was probably drawing it just partially on this. I mean, he even obviously quoted it. So.
Yep, definitely. For those who might not have been with. Oh, I'm sorry.
Lies was the other one.
Lies. Yeah.
Exchanging the glory of God for lies.
Yes, a teacher of lies, right? Verse 18 of chapter 2. Yeah. Yeah, Ben was just saying there's some clear connections here with what Paul's writing about. And Paul does. Remember, Paul quotes, that wasn't good. Okay, let's go back. Paul quotes, the just shall live by faith.